have dairy sensitivities. I mean, it's the most common sensitivity we find, but yet, you know, it's also one of the most difficult things to remove, and it also can be one of the most nutritious parts.
Sure.
So, you know, I'm really fascinated to hear what you do and what makes it unique, and what you're doing with these cows.
It's a great question, and for years I have recommended dairy, but goat milk or sheep milk dairy. And I found that children and adults could tolerate it much better, and I always thought that it had to do with the size of the protein. Somebody once said, well, a goat has a kid that's similar in size to a human, 15 pounds or so, whereas calves are 50, 60, 70 pounds. So I kind of went with that, and I would promote the use of goat's milk products, sheep milk products, but goat milk products you can't find organic, they're not grass-fed, and sheep milk dairy is almost impossible to find. In 2006, I visited Africa, and I learned of a product called mas, or amasi, and a type of cow that looked more like a camel that was a zebu cow, or Bos indicus. So I learned through a process of research that there are two species of cattle. One is the original cow, one is the more modern cow, and a subgenetic within each that determined the type of casein that was produced. Now, we're often taught that gluten and casein cause problems in children, particularly the ones that your centers are working with and educating. What we found is that these proteins stimulate opiate producing cells. They're opiate agonists. Gluten has gliadin as a part of it, and casein, particularly beta casein A1, forms beta casomorphine. Gluten stimulates two receptor sites in the gut to produce opiates, which is why the children have the repetitive behavior. It's why children with sensitivities don't often first exhibit gut or immune issues, they exhibit behavior issues. That's how celiac is initially diagnosed, by behavior and rage, etc. So what we found is that there's a protein in dairy called beta casein A1, known as the devil in the milk, and 99.99% of U.S., Australian, and European cattle produce it. Now you'll notice if they pan that the cattle you see here are Jerseys. Jersey cattle represent about 1% of American cattle. This type of cow is the newer cow, but what we did was we had started with 10,000 cows, and we did genetic testing to find out which ones produced milk with beta casein A1, and we excluded those. And so all of these cows, while they're the Bos taurus species, do not produce beta casein A1. It's selective breeding. It's not genetic tampering. You breed an A2 cow to an A2 cow, and you get an A2 offspring. So in a matter of 3 years, we were able to create a closed herd where our cattle produce dairy without the devil in the milk. And gluten, as bad as it is, stimulates two receptor sites in the gut to produce opiates. Beta casein A1 stimulates 26, which is why you're seeing so much sensitivity.
There's two questions I have. One is, the testing that's typically done in the United States, like we would get through, let's say, Metametrics, or do they test for only the beta casein, or do they test for both? Do you know?
They test for the whole blend. So what we've said is, it's not just one protein that's missing that we're focusing on. We have a brand new protein matrix we call Z protein for the zebu cattle. So to start, we have cattle that do not produce the devil in the milk. But then it's all about how we raise them. They are obviously outside getting sunshine.
Right.
We do once a day milking, which is unheard of in the dairy industry. They milk 2 or 3 times, keep them close. Why do we milk once? So they can walk up to a mile and get the food instead of having the food brought to them. In addition, because the modern pampered cow cannot tolerate walking a half mile or a mile, they're not strong anymore. They're bred for weakness, for big udders, small weak legs. We have to reverse the curse,
right. They don't want a lot of muscle, they want a lot of fat.
So we are breeding the Indian and African cattle genetics back in. So towards the end of this tour, we're going to show you the offspring of a cow that's not bred for massive milk production, but bred for resistance to disease, because we don't vaccinate. Organic dairies do. We don't medicate, we don't deworm. That's why goat's milk and sheep's milk isn't organic, because they use anti-parasitics. We don't do any of that, so we need to breed the strength in, not use chemicals, medications, etc. And as you'll see, we raise the calves on the mom, which is also unheard of. Even humane, I'm using air quotes, dairies, they raise their babies in hutches with replacement formula and pellets because they're so fragile, they want them to survive and become milkers. So we do everything differently here at Beyond Organic, not just to say we're different, but to capture the power of the sun and transfer it to humans.
Well, the other thing it told me, which is really fascinating, was the fact that not only the difference between the beta casein, which is really what we find, and the thing about that is that that's not what normally we find in human milk. Right?
Oh, that's a great point. Beta casein A1 is absent from mother's milk. Now,
Right.
some people argue we're the only species that drinks milk after we're weaned. Every animal on this farm, every skunk, every cat, every dog would drink milk if it was put in front of them. Humans drink it because we're able to. We have for thousands of years. We're also the only ones that Skype and send text messages, so it's a pretty silly analogy.
Right.
But it is critical to understand that when people are out there saying wheatgrass is the best food in the world, we've got plenty of cereal grass out here, but we can't digest it.
Right.
The cows are doing the work for us. It's organic. It's beyond organic. It's the right genetic. And children that get off milk go to rice milk, which is inferior, soy milk, which is dangerous, and almond milk, which is just highly processed. Dairy that is cultured live with probiotics, protein, CLA, omega-3s is probably the best brain food there is. We want to reconnect this powerful food with the children that you work with and everybody else. And so the food, just like the brain, has become disconnected. We want to reconnect it.
So the main problem with the beta casein is one is humans don't really have the enzymes to digest that as well.
Well,
Is
we
that
can't.
correct?
What happens is beta casein A1 has a different amino acid chain than beta casein A2, and it produces something called BCM7, beta casomorphine 7, and we can't eliminate it from the body. So it stays in the colon and it stimulates receptor sites to cause the brain activity in the second brain that is the gut. We all know that the pathology shows that more serotonin, more opiates, more brain chemicals are produced here than here. So it stays in the gut, constantly bothering the adult or the child. So what happens with beta casein A2 is it does not form that BCM7. There is an amino acid switch, they believe a genetic anomaly some 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, that made for this switch. But here's the good news. Every dairy in America, if they believe what we're saying, could switch to beta casein A1 free. They won't, because in the meantime they'd have to admit that what they have may not be as good.
Okay, so like you said, you know, the beta A1 casein is the one that we really normally don't make.
Right, correct.
The majority of cows right now and the majority of milk is that
You have
type.
to assume that it all is, because
Okay.
if it's not, there's no breed that is completely free of beta casein A1 in America, Europe, or Australia. So you have to assume that there's at the very least a mix of what you're getting,
Right.
unless you know specifically that it's
Okay,
not.
so human milk is made up of what type of?
Beta casein A2 is the only beta casein in mother's milk, and it's the only beta casein that we have in our cow's milk. Now there may be 3 and 4, they're still studying, but
Right.
1 and 2 are the big ones. We're free of beta casein A1.
Okay, so if it's obviously the type of casein that humans normally make, so essentially you're making cows that now make milk that is much closer to really human milk.
Which is how it was throughout history.
Right.
So
and
we're not doing anything new. We're going back to the older model.
So the chances of an individual having a reaction to it is going to be greatly reduced.
Correct.
And so we can get the benefits of milk, which are fantastic with all the properties, without possibly any sort of sensitivity or allergic reaction, because it's closer to normal human milk. So we're not reacting
Absolutely.
as if it's a foreign product.
That's it.
And it's closer to our own digestive enzymes and the way that we normally would digest milk.
Right. And then we want to make sure the dairy is cultured. It is low temperature processed, so the proteins are not denatured. There's many other things we do from start to finish,
So
but this genetic is key.
Things like homogenize
Nope.
or and is there any potential danger in that at all?
Well, our cheese is legal to be raw everywhere. We do it differently because we don't heat above cow body temperature, which is 101.5 degrees. You can do raw cheese up to 140 degrees, but we choose to do it completely raw. It's legal everywhere. We're in state inspected, federal inspection. We're a model dairy, unlike some of the raw dairies where you kind of have to sign that it's for your pets, etc. Our other dairy products are low temperature pasteurized using old kind of technology that allows us, it takes us 180 times longer, but it preserves some of the enzymes and it preserves the proteins, which are so valuable